I do not need to put a name to what I believe, because I just am. I am the force with no name and all names. I am all things and I'm no things. I'm everything and nothing. I'm everywhere and nowhere. Because I am all that is, therefore I'm all possibility. And when we do that, these neurons, pathways and networks stop firing off in relation to the rigid belief system and filtering reality for us. So now we can open to all possibility instead of being stuck with one or two possibilities called belief systems, which hold us in servitude and limitation for entire lives in these vibrational boxes that therefore come from these belief systems. We can be honest with ourselves as we break out of these belief systems. Crucial. Cognitive dissonance is not a bad thing. It's the way it's used that puts us in a state of enslavement because of it. If we are honest with ourselves, people that have belief systems of various kinds, who say, when I come into contact with experience or information that challenges my belief system, I'm not going to hold on till my knuckles turn white. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to look at this, and if it makes sense, I'm going to change the way I see the world. Cognitive dissonance then is a positive thing, and we move on. You know, people get embarrassed because they believe something, and they suddenly realize that it's actually a nonsense. But they shouldn't get embarrassed, because we live in a world where from cradle to grave we are pummeled with manipulation to believe things and take on belief systems that allow the few to control the many. Instead of being embarrassed when we suss it, we should be celebrating that we've sussed it, because we're no longer in servitude. And we can break out of these schizophrenias where, according to Doublethink and Orwell, we take on these contradictory views like war is peace and all the rest of it. Again, honesty, and say, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Because go back to consciousness. Does consciousness do war? No, consciousness does peace in its pure state. Therefore, anything that is being justified for war and slaughter and pain and suffering is by definition unsupportable. So instead of saying, well, we have a war and I'm going to explain it away because I'm fighting for peace, rubbish. War, end of story, no, unjustifiable, and therefore I'm not going to justify it under any means. Then the schizophrenias start to fall. We're not justifying the unjustifiable anymore. We're saying it's not justified, no longer has my support. And now the schizophrenia is breaking because we're no longer supporting two contradictory things. We're taking a point of view of consciousness, peace, love, caring, empathy, compassion, and anything that is contradictory to that, we're not interested in. The schizophrenia starts to break up. And all these things are breaking down it's like a web that we're caught in. The strands pulled off as we start to break down the contradictions of being honest with ourselves in terms of our belief system. And we move from consciousness or to consciousness from mind. Crucially. Because if we can connect with consciousness while in this reality, we bring that awareness and that energy into this reality and we start to change it. The energy itself, as we become conscious, it's not just becoming conscious, it's actually an energy. And when we start to be vehicles for it, we start literally to change the energy of this reality and we start to affect other people. You know, it's funny, when I was in that ayahuasca state, and this voice was talking to me, it was explaining to me that actually voice-to-ear communication is not the prime level of communication, although we think it is. And it showed me this picture, and I walked onto a stage like this, and I stood there and never said a word. I was looking at this as this was going on, never said anything. And then two people in the front, I saw it from this back angle, two ladies in this ayahuasca state, one elbowed the other and pointed at me and said, "What the bloody hell's going on?" I was standing there not speaking. And the voice said to me, "You only speak because if you didn't, the audience would ask, when the hell is he going to start?" Because what point it was making was the biggest communication between people in situations like this, both ways, not just one way, and between people, and in general conversation and interaction, is not actually voice to ear. That's kind of left brain mind stuff. The real connection is through the energy that we exude. And when we start to become conscious, we become vehicles for a very different energy to the one that we've been used to. And things start to change in a way that just spontaneously change. You can walk past someone in the supermarket, and if you're vibrating to this new energy, then you start to affect them. And they start to feel differently. And they'll never say it was that bloke or that lady I passed when I was getting a tin of beans, but they'll just start to feel different. Because energetically, we have been affected. And this is what's happening at this time. The energy of this reality is changing, and those that are tuning to it are becoming very, very different people. And this is the key. As Albert Einstein said, it's a wonderful line. You cannot solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. And that's what we've been trying to do in this schism reality, is we've been creating problems by a certain perception and attitude to life and perception of life, and then when we've created those problems with the same perceptions, we've come and tried to solve the problems. No way. We have to move to another level of consciousness, and then this world can change. If we don't, it cannot. He also said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, something else that the human race has become absolutely brilliant at. And that's why we go round and round and round, generation after generation, in the same basic state of conflict and war and all the stuff. Not most people, but the world in general. And only by going to another level of consciousness and bringing that awareness into this reality can this reality change. If we don't do that, it can't change. And the idea of the conspiracy is to put people in a box to keep them from becoming that consciousness, not least by kidding them that they're not that consciousness and they're just their body. And it's not that these manipulators, reptilian or Illuminati in human form, are actually more powerful or anything than we are. They're not. They're in a box too. They're in a vibrational box because anyone that wishes to have power over others, anyone that can do things to people and have no empathy for the consequences, is themselves in a tiny box of perception. What the Illuminati and what the manipulators have done, and they've done it brilliantly, I have to say, because they may not be wise, but they are clever on an intellectual level. Cleverness without wisdom is the most destructive force on earth. That's why we are in such a state that we're in. You know, it's very clever to know how to build an atomic bomb, but it's not wise to do so. There is a difference between cleverness and wisdom. But on an intellectual level, they're very clever. And what they've done is manipulate humanity through the suppression of knowledge and these other means into a smaller box than they're in. But we have the potential to get out of the box. Well, they have the potential too, but far less potential because they're so caught in this mentality that they're in of control. And what is control? Control is massive, massive insecurity. That's what these people are, the Illuminati and these reptilian entities and all the rest. They are consumed by insecurity and fear themselves. That's why they know how to manipulate fear and insecurity so well, because they're connected to it so powerfully. People who are insecure want to control everything because they're not secure enough within themselves just to go with the flow of life and see where it goes. Secure people don't need control over other people. Insecure people do. And I use this analogy a lot because it really kind of encapsulates it for me. Our natural state is not what we have been experiencing in known human history anyway. Our natural state is where we're going and more people are opening up to. And I use this analogy like the natural state of a ball is floating on the top of the water, floating on the top of the tank or whatever. To keep it in an unnatural state, you have to push it down to the bottom of the water. I mean, you can't let it go. You have to constantly hold it there. And that's why, as I've been describing today, and I could describe a lot more, We have been subjected to multi-levels of suppression and manipulation